When did Starbucks stop being a place you go and start being a place you pass through?
Tim, we've got some news from Starbucks.
The CEO of Starbucks set to tell investors his long-term financial goals.
We are definitely closer than we ever have been, and I'm really proud of the progress we've made over the last year.
Not because the coffee changed. The coffee is still fine. But because the space feels different. Louder. Tighter. Less like a place to sit. And more like a waiting room for mobile orders you didn't place. People hover, names are called, drinks move fast, no one really stays. That feeling isn't accidental. As Starbucks expanded, it didn't just open more stores, it quietly took on more roles at once. Fast service retailer, app-first pickup hub, drive-thru machine, promo-driven loyalty engine. Each role made sense, each improved efficiency, each looked like smart growth. And somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like Starbucks.
You know, I think about a year ago when I rolled out the idea of back to Starbucks, we said we were going to get back to being a customer service organization that could deliver great experiences in a timely manner. And I think that's exactly what we've accomplished.
It's tempting to blame this on overexpansion. Too many locations, too much scale. But that explanation misses something more subtle. Starbucks didn't only grow bigger, it grew different. It optimized for speed and volume in ways that slowly reshaped what customers were encouraged to value, and what the experience no longer protected. Nothing broke overnight. There was no single bad decision, just a sense of reasonable ones that quietly shifted the brand's center of gravity. The script traces how that shift happened, which decisions accelerated it, and why the change was almost invisible while it was happening. Because the most dangerous brand mistakes don't look like mistakes at all. They look like progress, right up until the moment you realize something essential is already gone. From the beginning, Starbucks was never really selling coffee. It was selling a place. Howard Schultz often described Starbucks as the third place. Not home, not work, but something in between. A space where people could slow down, feel recognized, and spend time without being rushed. That framing mattered because it redefined the product itself. The latte wasn't the value, the environment was. What customers paid extra for wasn't just caffeine. It was the ambiance, the music, the warmth of the lighting, the familiar barista who knew your order, and the quiet permission to sit without pressure. Starbucks made time feel well spent. Staying wasn't an inconvenience to the business. It was proof the experience worked. That distinction is important, because Starbucks didn't grow despite this idea. It grew because of it. In its early years, the company showed something rare. That an experience-driven brand could scale without immediately losing its identity. Stores multiplied, but the feeling remained recognizable. Whether you were in Seattle or Chicago, you knew what Starbucks stood for. And that early success quietly shaped how future decisions were made. When something works at scale, it creates confidence that it will keep working, even as the company grows far beyond its original size. The experience became something assumed rather than actively protected, treated less like the product itself and more like a feature that would naturally survive expansion. Starbucks didn't abandon its identity, it just wasn't designed into the system that followed. As the company scaled, the center of gravity shifted toward growth engines that rewarded one thing above all else: throughput. More customers per hour, more transactions per store, more reasons to visit, more times per day. That meant more locations and more day parts. A menu that expanded far beyond coffee into custom drinks, seasonal launches, add-ons, and modifiers that boosted ticket size. Each addition increased revenue potential. Each one also added friction, noise, and time pressure to the experience. Then came the drive-thru. In suburban markets, drive-thrus made sense. They increased sales, widened access, and matched how people moved through their day. But they also trained a different kind of behavior, built around speed and predictability. The store stopped being a destination and became a pass-through. Digital convenience pushed the shift further. Mobile ordering started as a complement. Over time, it became central. The app didn't just serve customers, it reshaped the store. Orders arrived invisibly. Queues became harder to read. The space was filled with people who weren't really there to be there. None of these moves were mistakes. They worked as designed, making Starbucks easier to access and monetize at scale. The trade-off was subtler. These systems didn't just change how Starbucks operated, they changed what customers were trained to value. Speed over atmosphere. Habit over ritual. The brand still looked the same, but the experience became standardized and transactional. And this is how identity drift happens.
Was all about. And behind the scenes, you might remember I was talking about some technology.
Right.
We call it the smart queue.
Yes.
Which was all about basically sequencing the orders for our drive-through, the counter, and mobile order pickup.
As the operating system took over, the brand became easier to manage and easier to dilute. The same logic that made Starbucks scalable also began stripping away what made it feel distinctive. Walk into a Starbucks built in the early 2000s and one built a decade later, and the difference is obvious. Older stores prioritized seating, armchairs, couches, clustered tables meant for staying. Newer formats leaned toward harder chairs, narrower tables, and tighter layouts. The square footage didn't always shrink, but the invitation to linger did. Stores weren't saying leave, they were just no longer saying stay. At the same time, the most human parts of the experience were standardized. For years, Starbucks emphasized personal interaction. Handwritten names, brief conversations, familiar baristas. As volume increased, those moments became liabilities. Printed labels replaced marker pens. Drink making became more assembly line oriented. Accuracy and speed improved, but the experience became something designed to be measured and optimized. The loyalty program reinforced the shift. What started as a way to encourage return visits moved towards spend-based rewards and multipliers. Customers stopped returning out of habit and started optimizing. Starbucks became less a place you went and more a system you learned to use. Mobile ordering intensified the collision. By the late 2010s, mobile orders made up a significant share of transactions, but stores were still designed for a single flow. Pickup traffic crowded cafe space. Orders appeared without visible lines. Even customers who wanted to stay were surrounded by urgency. Then came a clear signal of how Starbucks now competed. In 2024, the company introduced value-oriented bundle meals, an efficient response to competitive pressure. The move didn't lower quality, but it did lower how much atmosphere mattered to the value proposition. This is the quiet warning for any growing business. You don't lose your edge because quality collapses. You'll lose it when the system stops protecting what customers can't get anywhere else. And once differentiation becomes optional, growth doesn't compound loyalty. It teaches customers how easily you can be replaced. Eventually, the drift became hard to ignore, even at the top. Laxman Narasimhan took over as CEO on March 20, 2023.
For this company. The one thing that I wanted to be sure of is that, that there would be investments made in order for us to renew the partner experience, in order for us to rethink the customer experience. And some of the things Howard has done ever since he's come in terms of some of the bold decisions he's made me actually a lot more comfortable. So I'm at peace.
Inheriting a company that was operationally strong, but increasingly disconnected from how customers described it. Sales metrics told one story. The in-store experience told another. And the gap was getting louder. His tenure didn't last long. By 2024, Starbucks announced Brian Niccol as the incoming CEO, with the transition beginning in September. The speed of the change mattered. It signaled that the issue wasn't cyclical. It was structural. Something about how Starbucks showed up in the real world had slipped. Under Nicole, the messaging shifted quickly. Back to Starbucks began circulating publicly, paired with unusually direct acknowledgments of missteps. One theme was consistent. The company had moved too far away from the cafe experience. In the pursuit of convenience and throughput, the third place had been deprioritized and customers noticed. That admission carried an uncomfortable tension. If efficiency and throughput were delivering results, why reverse course now? At what point does discipline start to look like drift? And how much inefficiency can a business tolerate before investors lose patience? The corrective actions weren't abstract. Leadership talked about restoring more in-store seating, reintroducing ceramic mugs in some contexts, paying closer attention to store comfort after years of prioritizing drive-through and mobile efficiency. These weren't cosmetic tweaks. They were operational reversals, decisions that slow turnover and make spreadsheets look worse before they look better. In finance terms, it's choosing resilience over maximum yield. Less exciting, less efficient, and not the kind of move that earns applause on an earnings call. What made this moment different was the admission behind it. You can't campaign your way out of an experience problem. Customers don't read strategy decks or care about EBITDA margins. They respond to whether a space feels like it wants them there or is quietly asking them to leave. And if a financial plan looks perfect on paper but keeps you stressed, rushed, and reactive, what exactly is it optimized for? Returns or reassurance? That's the reality leadership was responding to. Brand identity lives in physical choices, chairs instead of standing room, mugs instead of disposables, patience instead of speed. In money management, the same pattern holds. The plans that survive volatility are rarely the ones that look most efficient at the peak. Because whether you're running a global brand or managing your own finances, growth always forces the same question. How much short-term efficiency are you willing to trade for something that actually lasts? What happened at Starbucks follows a familiar pattern, one that appears whether growth accelerates faster than clarity. Expansion always adds complexity. More products, more channels, more customer types, more rush periods colliding with each other. What used to be simple becomes fragile. At first, this is healthy. Standardization lowers costs, improves reliability, and makes growth manageable. But over time, it changes what gets protected. Anything that can't be measured easily, atmosphere, trust, experience, patience, starts losing internal battles to things that can. This is where identity erosion actually happens. Not because companies scale, but because they scale the wrong variable. Convenience grows faster than experience. Efficiency grows faster than meaning. What began as a feature quietly became the product. And this isn't just a brand lesson. It's a financial one. The same logic shows up in how people manage money and build businesses. Short-term optimization often feels like responsibility. Higher yields look smarter than stability. Faster growth looks better than durability. Leverage looks like confidence. Activity feels like progress. On paper, everything improves, right up until it doesn't. Think of it like building a house by optimizing only for speed. You save time by skipping inspections, using lighter materials, and cutting corners that don't show up immediately. The house looks finished faster. It even holds up in good weather. But when conditions change, when rates rise, cash flow tightens, or demand softens, the weaknesses surface all at once. Financially, this is how fragility builds. When a person prioritizes liquidity over resilience, or yield over safety, they're often trading away margin of error. When a business prioritizes throughput over trust or efficiency over experience, it's doing the same thing at scale. The system works beautifully as long as nothing goes wrong. The moment volatility shows up, there's nothing left absorbing the shock. This is why the most dangerous financial strategies rarely look reckless. They look efficient. They look disciplined. They look like best practices. Until they're stress tested. Starbucks scaled convenience faster than experience. In money and business, the parallel is clear. When optimization replaces protection, growth doesn't compound strength. It compounds exposure. Look closely at what Starbucks struggled to protect, and the pattern becomes familiar. Start with one non-negotiable experience. For Starbucks, that means protecting at least one cafe format where the third place still exists. Comfortable seating, slower pace, real human interaction, even if it's less efficient. Financially, this is your core holding. The asset or income stream designed for durability, not excitement. If everything you own is optimized for short-term performance, stability disappears. Next, separate flows instead of forcing everything into one system. Starbucks tried to serve mobile pickup and linger-in cafe customers in the same space, and both suffered. In money management, this happens when long-term investments are treated like short-term cash. Different goals need different structures. When you blend them, convenience erodes intention. Then there's what you reward. Starbucks' loyalty program trained customers to optimize for deals. People and businesses do the same when they reward activity over outcomes. Constant trading feels productive, but it often undermines long-term returns. What you incentivize, points, yields, frequency, grows. Measure what doesn't show up on dashboards. Starbucks tracked speed and volume, but struggled to measure comfort or the desire to stay. Personal finance has the same blind spots: stress tolerance, flexibility, unseen risk. If your plan only works when everything goes right, it isn't a plan. It's a bet. And finally, don't confuse access with value. Starbucks didn't lose its identity overnight. A series of reasonable, efficiency-driven decisions slowly shifted the brand from a place people chose to spend time into a system designed to move them through. Seating was reduced, human interaction standardized, and convenience elevated. None of this broke the business, but together, it redefined what Starbucks stood for. The mistake wasn't growth itself. It was letting speed, volume, and throughput quietly become the definition of success, until the experience stopped being the product and became something to optimize away. This pattern shows up far beyond Starbucks. In business and personal finance, the same logic applies. Short-term efficiency often looks like responsibility. Faster returns feel smarter than patience. Higher yields look better than resilience. Constant liquidity feels like control. On paper, everything appears optimized. But optimization has a cost. When every decision is driven by immediacy, the foundation that creates long-term value quietly erodes. Risks piles up where it's hardest to see. Margin of safety disappears. What once absorbed shocks now amplifies them. The system works perfectly until conditions change. Growth doesn't just increase revenue. It magnifies whatever you choose to measure, reward, and protect. If you reward speed, you get fragility. If you reward yield without risk awareness, you get exposure. If you reward activity, you get motion, not progress. Over time, the system trains behavior, whether you intended to or not. That's the real lesson hiding inside the Starbucks story. Because in money, just like in business, what feels efficient in the short term often determines how painful the long term becomes. And the question isn't whether growth is good or bad. It's whether the thing you're growing is actually strong enough to carry it. If you want to see how smart choices, risk, and timing shape real outcomes, hit subscribe. See you on the next one.